Hi. A 10-year-long saga ended last week. The fight between Google and Oracle on copyright infringement of Java SE APIs is finally seeing the full stop. Or is it? If you're wondering what the saga was, let's talk a bit about the history and then let me take you to the conclusion. So this started in August of 2010 when Oracle filed a lawsuit against Google over its Android OS, alleging that Google was infringing on 7 Java patents with Android and its Dalvik virtual machine. The case ended in about 2 years when a unanimous decision was made by the jury of the court of Judge William Alsup of the District Court of Northern California. This decision ruled in favor of Google, saying that Android did not in fact infringe on the patents in question. Oracle took this case to the US Court of Appeals of the Federal Circuit, which then ruled in favor of Oracle, saying that the APIs were in fact copyrightable. This case was then taken to the Supreme Court, which then declined to hear the case. In what followed, both parties were yet again seen fighting in a US District Court, this time trying to prove that Google's use of the APIs was in fact fair use. This again got dragged all the way to the Supreme Court, whose final ruling was last done in Google's favor on April 5th of this year, which was about 10 days ago. Now, before we talk about the fight itself, let's first understand what copyright infringement means and what is the difference between copyright and patent. Copyright is a type of intellectual property that gives its owner the exclusive right to make copies of the creative work. Copyright is intended to protect the original expression of the idea, but not the idea itself. A patent is a title that gives its owner the legal right to exclude others from making, using, or selling an invention for a limited period of years in exchange for publishing and enabling public disclosure for the invention. Even in the context of software development, copyright and patent protect two different, non-overlapping aspects. Patent protects the functional aspects of the software, such as processes or methods of operation, something that we would call features of the software. You can be sued over if you reproduce patented processes or methods even in independently written code. This is also called patent infringement. On the other hand, copyright is supposed to protect the artistic aspects of the software code, not the functional aspects. So if I copy a software's features or functions or methods and the software is protected by copyright, I could not be sued over. But copyright is also not useless. If someone copies all or part of your source code or the compiled code, then a court could decide that some artistic aspects of the code have been copied, thereby leading to copyright infringement. When we heard the ruling of the US District Court in mid-2012, we realized that in essence, Google actually copied code from Java programming tools by Oracle, which means Oracle actually won the case. But according to the court, that did not count as infringement on Oracle's patents in question. But wait, we just talked about it being copyright infringement, copying source code being copyright infringement. So why did that not count as infringement? Also, since the court actually ruled that Google copied code. Here I introduce something else, the Copyright Act. According to the Copyright Act, copyright protection in a work must not extend to any of the functional system or methods of operation, regardless of the form in which the system or method is described in the work. Or in simpler terms, a feature of an artistic work is not copyright protectable no matter how it is implemented. In line with that, Google had argued that if Java API is copyrightable, then the copyright protection would extend to the functional system described by the Java API. And for anyone to create a functional system exactly as in the Java API, they would have to copy the Java API. Or again, simply put, If Java API is copyrightable, then the exact features offered by the Java API should also be copyrightable. And since Google wanted to use the exact features offered by Java APIs, they would have to essentially copy the Java API. And since copying features was more of a patent infringement than a copyright infringement, which meant that Java API was being patent protected through a copyright. In this discussion, if you think about it, Google could have written the declaring code, which is the Java API here, and organized it in a number of ways, and still achieved the same functional system, which is basically what the Federal Circuit argued when Oracle took this case to the US Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. The Federal Circuit gave an example. Windows Phone API from Microsoft provides a similar functionality with an entirely different structure, naming scheme and selection than the Java API. Whether Google could copy the functional system as described in the Java API is apparently a question of compatibility, which the court said should be addressed with a fair use defense. This is when the two parties started to argue about the fair use aspect of the case. In an attempt to protect the open source community, Oracle mentioned that Google was the one keeping their code locked in a walled garden. Oracle's co-CEO Safra Catz gave a statement that around mid-2000s they thought that Sun Microsystems would not invest enough in Java, which was critical for their products. And in order to avoid losing Java to Decay or to a competitor, Oracle started trying to buy it. She also mentioned that by the time they were done with the deal, which is around early 2010, Android already had a good stronghold in the market. A too large of an effect on openness of Java to reverse. It does make sense, right? At some point, I do agree with her claim that the entire community of Java got split into two. Some programmers switched to Android, and hence limiting the universality of Java. Java was built so people could write code once and run it anywhere. But with Android, you cannot run it on anything but Android. And so it was a bit far-fetched of a statement that Android was a free and open platform. To all of these claims, Larry Page, Alphabet CEO and co-founder of Google, testified that copying and re-implemented the said APIs was standard industry practice. He also claimed that the Google's implementation of the said APIs was original and transformative, suggesting that his company's coding would fall under fair use. When presented with a slide deck showing that Android ecosystem is generating $43 billion in revenue each year, he argued that the massive revenue described in the slide wasn't actually going to Google's pockets and was going to the phone manufacturers and carriers. Google also based most of its arguments on the 4 core tenets of fair use. In the final closing arguments, Oracle accused Google of stealing, while Google suggested that Android transformed the smartphone market, and Oracle sued out of desperation when its own smartphone attempts failed to launch. The final ruling of this fight came in the Supreme Court, in the Court of Justice Breyer, when he announced the opinion of the court on 5th of this month. He said, and I quote, "The lower courts have considered two aspects: whether Java SE's owner could copyright the portion that Google copied, and two, whether Google's copying nonetheless constituted a fair use of that material, thereby freeing Google from copyright liability. The Federal Circuit held in Oracle's favor, that is, the portion is copyrightable and Google's copying did not constitute a fair use. In reviewing that decision, we assume, for argument's sake, that the material was copyrightable. But we hold that the copying here at issue nonetheless constituted a fair use. Hence, Google's copying did not violate the copyright law. He goes on to write that Google's copying of the Java SE API, which included only those lines of code that were needed to allow programmers to put their accrued talents to work in a new and transformative program, was a fair use of that material as a matter of law. And with this, marking a big win for Google. During all of this, I understood two things. I think that most of our open source licenses, like the GNU license or the MIT license, usually do not allow copying or making code monetizable as is. If the code gets transformed, it does not violate the open source license anymore. At the same time, like in our movies, an idea gets value, credit, sometimes money, lots of money. But in software somehow, that credit to open source software gets lost. But this is only what I feel. I would love to know what you all think about this. Let me know in the comments below and maybe we can have a discussion on this. Until then, thanks for watching. Hope you got something new to learn today and see you in the next one.